What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to the Funky Brain Podcast. My name is Dennis, and this is my funky brain. I think a little differently sometimes, but I'm feeling much better now. But anyway, our guest today is an inspiring high-performance athlete and a leadership coach, an Olympic gold medal winner, winning America's first ever gold medal in whitewater canoe slalom. And he now helps leaders and teams perform their best with a concept that I absolutely love and also incorporate a version of in my business. And that is simple, slower, and less. And I'll let him expand on that here shortly. But Mr. Joe Jacobi, how are you doing today, sir?
Bon dia, Dennis. It's great to meet you. I'm having so much fun talking to you already. I'm excited to be here.
Bon dia. So, Joe, tell us where you are right now.
Yeah, so actually, bon dia is a good way to start. Bon dia is the way the Catalan people say good morning or good day. I am in the Spanish state of Catalonia, which is the same Spanish state that Barcelona is in northeastern Spain. I live in La Seu d'Urgell, which is a town of 12,000 people, about 2.5 hours north of Barcelona, right along the French border in the Pyrenees Mountains. And really right outside my window is the Parc del Segre, which is the 1992 Olympic whitewater canoeing venue, which is a national team training center for the Spanish canoeing program today. But it's also just an incredible public resource for the people of La Seu d'Urgell. I mean, there's walking trails and just a lot of activities to do in the park. And it's the Olympics. The Olympics really has a hard time making use of their Olympic venues after the games are over. And you'd be hard pressed to find a city or a venue that has done better than ours, the 1992 Olympic whitewater canoeing venue.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear that all the time because these countries go out and spend billions of dollars to qualify to host the Olympics. And then those places, those arenas they build, the stadiums, everything that they build to host the Olympics ends up sitting there, and people go bankrupt and lose their families and businesses and everything.
It really does happen a lot. And I mean, it's a really big issue facing the Olympic movement right now. There is a lot more work, I guess, being done with more sustainable venues, more temporary venues that can be taken down after the games. But I just think in general that I think every city has to very thoughtfully consider whether this is a good idea or not. I mean, it is worth pointing out the last time that the International Olympic Committee awarded the Summer Olympic Games, there were only two candidate cities there. It was Paris and Los Angeles. And so they just decided to give two Olympic Games to both cities, Paris for 2024 and LA for 2028. And I think both of those cities are going to have, social and economic challenges related to their Olympic bid. But the point is, there was nobody else. I think everyone else figured out this is not a very good deal for us. And I think that's the part that is getting really interesting about the Olympic movement and the Olympic Games in general, that it's like anything in business. You have to be able to change and adapt with the conditions of the world and the conditions of people, the human condition in general. And the International Olympic Committee is not known for being a very progressive organization that is good at listening to a lot of people.
Share with us a little bit about your story and how it led to what you do today.
In 2009, I became the chief executive officer, the interim chief executive officer of USA Canoe Kayak, which at the time was the national governing body for competitive canoeing in the United States underneath the umbrella of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. It was kind of my dream job and the only time that I ever had a conventional paycheck job in my life. I was the CEO of this organization, and we had a few administrative staff members and some coaches that worked for the organization. We had a membership base and a lot of volunteer committees. And I didn't do very well at the job. I did the job for 5 years. My first 2.5 years on the job, I didn't do very well at all. I was really good at trying to take care of everyone else, but never taking care of myself. That caught up to me really quickly, Dennis. And I kind of lost my way with my health. And I gained a lot of weight. I was sleeping really poorly. I was very irritable with my decisions and choices. And yeah, it was we always talk about how good habits are just sort of one small step at a time, consistently performed. Bad habits are a little bit the same thing. It's like one small step done consistently over time. And I worked myself into a pretty poor position. But the good news was I didn't quit or leave my job at the low point. I got better at what I did. I figured out ways to sort of work with my health in really small steps forward every day. And that started very slowly with my physical health. And then eventually, I started to work on elements of mind and spirit as well as just the body. And I think after about 5 years, not only was I doing a lot better in my work, but I saw an opportunity where serving athletes that want to win medals in the Olympic Games for the United States is a very worthwhile endeavor. But I also felt like I had learned so much I was learning so much in my own journey to be more healthful that I think could apply to more kinds of people than just elite athletes living a very unique kind of lifestyle. And that became more interesting. So that was kind of where I had an opportunity to go. Eventually that happened in the form of being a performance coach. Even today, I think a lot of typically my first coaching call conversation, like my intake call with a client or prospective client, typically starts something like this. Hey, listen, like, Dennis, you're going to forget more about being a great podcast host between now and the end of the day than I'm going to know my entire life. So, let's just kind of make an agreement here that our conversation today is going to be on an exchange of ideas, a transfer of ideas from being like a high performer in sport to being a high performance in podcasts. We can just make that agreement, like we can really start to find some commonality and build. And whether that's sales and technology or medicine or education or military leadership, establishing that really kind of created a great platform in which to speak and converse and ultimately support and coach high performers in other industry. That's kind of what led me professionally to what I'm doing right now.
I love that. That's a great story. So tell us a little bit more about, and because I love this, I also incorporate a version of this into my coaching, and that's the art of reduction, right? And what I say is slow down to get there faster. For you, it's simple, slower, and less. I love it. I think it's the way to become successful and happy and healthy.
For me, simple, slower, and less is a way of life where I live in La Selle d'Urgell, in the Catalan Pyrenees. People are just really good at disconnecting, knowing how to figure out what's important about life. That's simple. Slowing down, that's just gearing. And less is just until you try it, like you'll never know. I feel like every big change I've made in my life, there's always been like what I call a control group. So like I've had a control group of not being simple, of not being slower, of not doing less, but really kind of that more. I will say that when I coach American clients, I'm not trying to impose a way of life on them. I tried to figure out ways to take ways about the way people live in Catalonia and apply it in the form of just a point of reflection. We can all just take, if you want to double sales or you want to 10x the number of listeners you have on a podcast, we can figure out a point of reflection of which to figure out like what we have to get rid of in order to figure out, what we need to kind of focus more effort on. Also, mindset is another thing. Again, I'm not asking American clients that are maybe used to living a faster paced life to live this way, but I think adopting a simple, slower, less mindset is something that even Olympic gold medal winning athletes do, even in that idea of going faster and trying to innovate more and be more successful. Simple, slower, and less has its way. So my question for you is that you told me you're getting ready to make the move to Mexico and live by the sea, live close to the water. I wonder what parts of that culture appealed to you that maybe you thought you could not only integrate into your own life, but maybe find a way to share it with others.
I love that. That's great. I love that you asked me a question. It's always me asking the questions. That's great. So, I can actually take this back to a story of transformational thinking that occurred in me. So I don't know if you're aware, and I don't always lead with it all, but I've been sober 18 years now.
Oh,
So I'm
cool. Yeah.
49 years old. When I was a kid, I was a bit of a crazy maniac mess for a long time. And, I had a lot of growing up to do, and it could be painful growing up in your 30s and 40s and beyond, right? At least starting then. We're all always growing. We're all always a work in progress. But I went to Belize when I was about a year or two sober, and I started, let's just say about sobriety is that being sober doesn't mean not drinking or whatever. It's about growing up. It's about looking the world in the eye, being a mature adult and taking care of responsibilities and just figuring a new way of living out that's healthy. You talked about your health and stuff. And so anyway, I went down to Belize. That trip was a real transformational trip for me. I learned how to dive. I started scuba diving. I started running on that trip on the beach. And that's why I'm leading with this story is that every morning I would get up and I would walk down the beach. I started jogging. I saw other people jogging and I was jogging. And I would go past this one kid in this other resort that was like a mile down the beach. And he was so happy. And his job, and this was his job, not a career. This was all he had. This is all they have. We're in a third world country, was to sweep the seaweed, was to rake the seaweed off for us rich Americans, fat rich Americans that go down to enjoy their world. And he was the happiest guy I ever met. His job was to rake seaweed, probably made $10 a day. And his job was to rake seaweed. And every morning he'd be like, "Good morning, sir. How are you today?" And he was genuinely happy. It was so strange because we're all so worried about everything that's going on here in the States, worried about what people think about us and our 401k plans and politics and all this crap that's invading our senses, invading our brains and keeping us sick and unhappy and unhealthy. And the solution, and this is another thing I'm going to lead in, which you were just talking about, is less. Less is more. And we always want to add, oh, this is going wrong. I'm going to add this. I'm going to buy this self-help book. I'm going to add this into my life to make my life better. And we end up under this pile of crap and we're still sick. So the art of reduction is so important. And when I started realizing that in Belize, and I've since been to every beach in the Caribbean and every island, and I noticed it's a trend. Like people there are not worried about, can I retire when I'm 50? They're worried about, do I get to eat today? How's my family doing? They're worried about more primal things than we're worried about. Sure. All these luxury things that are keeping us sick. And so I really took heart to that. And I'm moving there to get away from the rat race, to get back in touch with me again, to focus on what's important. You were talking about you got sick because there was that you weren't taking care of yourself. And that self-love, self-respect, self-care is so important. If we have a goal to become successful financially, it comes while we're taking care of ourselves. When we focus on doing the job well instead of the goal, when can I retire? When can I make my million? When can I do this? When can I do that? We get sick along the way.
I always say, I never fault the goal, that someone sets. The goal is the goal. I think that what is really hard to see, it's easy to be attracted to the outcome of the goal. But I think it's really harder to understand that even if you get the goal, what is the weight of that goal? Like how much time does it really occupy? It's like investing. It's like having an investment. Like if you can truly invest your money somewhere and you're excited about it and feel good about it and can truly let go of it, fantastic. If you have to think about it, it's and by the way, and you think about it in a way where you kind of miss that moment of that little boy sweeping the seaweed, you missed what really mattered. And so I guess that's always the consideration is how do you create that awareness? And more deeply, I think what I learned is that when you kind of realize that you're going to move to a place that is super different than the US. And again, I'm not faulting any of the way that we think in the US and the goals that we set. But what I do think is really hard is that, it's not very realistic that someone is just going to adapt that way of life here. So it's how do you create these really, really small steps of the way of life? And what is the 5-minute meditation or the 5-minute journaling exercise of sitting on a beach and what you notice in Playa del Carmen look like to the first 5 minutes of the day of someone sitting in a studio apartment in downtown Manhattan. It's not easy to figure that out, but I think that's kind of where life in Playa del Carmen or Catalunya meets someone living, in that studio apartment in New York City.
Interesting. Well, you said an important word, and it's awareness. I think most people really just don't have the awareness that what's going on. We were brought up in this conditioning program to help us fit into this world that we live in, look like this, act like this, dress like this, say these things, work here, make this much money, marry this person. We need all that for our happiness. And not everybody's built for that. This whole system we live in was designed for only a few to really conquer at a high level. And when we don't, we feel like failures and we get sick inside. And then you fail across all these different areas of your life. And then addictions happen. Oh, well, I'm not living up to what other people think I'm supposed to be doing. So, and I don't know how to handle that feeling, that pain. So I'm going to drink, or I'm going to scroll my phone all day, or I'm going to watch 6 hours of Netflix, or I'm going to watch porn, or I'm going to overeat. I'm going to be on that Chick-fil-A line at 3:00 in the afternoon, even though I'm not hungry. Like all these distractions that we put ourselves into from feeling and growing. And then I think when the pain is deep enough, the awareness comes. And then we reach out to somebody like me or you, like a coach, to help pull me through to the other side.
One of the things I've seen living here in this country, so where I am in Catalunya, there are a lot of political and social tensions between Catalunya and Spain. Right. There's definitely like a faction here a big faction that, would love to see an independent Catalunya. So it's not that I'm here to make a position on that, but what I would say, I think I've kind of watched documentaries and you speak to people and you see some really big differences and I think what you're alluding to is that suppression is really, really scary. Now, it's one thing like when one person suppresses, when you see a whole culture do it. So, I mean, look, it just wasn't that long ago that this country, Spain, was run by a dictator named Franco. It was just less than 2 years after Franco died that the Spanish Parliament passed a rule that literally translates as the law of forgetting, the law. And it was like, we're just going to push this down and we are going to go forward. And it actually kind of took me moving and living in a place and starting to process that and the people who I talk to on a daily level, the people with whom I'm in relationships with here, living that suppression that existed in this country that, just gets pushed down to start to see things, where I don't have that attachment. I wasn't born and raised here. To start to look at, cultural suppression in the United States differently as well, and start to see certain kinds of suppression in the US where I was born and raised a little bit differently. It took living in this environment to start to see that differently. I don't look at the Catalans' position of being wanting to be independent as rational or irrational. Look, if you sit down and you have a coffee with 4 couples that are all, say, 50 years old or older, and you ask them how many of their grandparents how many of them had a grandparent that was either killed, tortured, or chased out by a member of Franco's army, and 6 out of 8 raised their hand. It's like an oh my God kind of moment. I mean, all of a sudden it's like your positions of whether you want to be, the idea of wanting to be independent is not like rational or irrational anymore. It's like a grandparent, No, you flip that back to the United States and, you kind of start to get into some of the cultural parts of pain, real parts of American society that are feeling. And we're not talking about great grandparents. Like we're talking about grandparents. We're talking about mom and dads, brothers and sisters, their children. Like, yeah, suppression sucks, and I think that's something that I've brought, that I start to bring out more and more out of living here because I'm not from here, but you see it. And again, the late 1970s were not that long ago here. And the country has progressed in some ways, and in other ways, it's hard. But it gives you that perspective of the world around you.
Yeah, but I like the simplicity. And that's another reason I'm moving. It's like the simplicity.
Yes.
I get overwhelmed just like everybody else. And I have a lot of tools in my belt. And I have a coach that I work with too. And I work with lots of people to remind me on a daily basis to slow down and keep it simple, those types of things.
Yeah.
But still, it's like I get caught up in it all. And I don't have some of the responsibilities that other people have. And I have the chance to go. So I'm going. I want to streamline my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main reason for the big move.
How exciting. That's great. I'm so happy for you. You actually said a few minutes ago that the culture, a lot of the elements of the American culture are sort of geared for like a few people to win. My observation, it's also geared for only a few people to get out of it as well, to sort of escape it. And I think what is really, really scary is what happens in between. Like that's, where there's just so much, work that needs to be done between the few that are really succeeding and the few that figure out, that there is a really different kind of alternative. I will say, making the choice to move away from the United States for me is not quick. My change in health was it was slow. It took a long time. Losing weight took a long time. Figuring out a way to be creative, build business, all that took a long, long time to figure out. And it's like there's still elements that you're trying to figure it out. But what I think that happens is that when you actually begin that journey of leaving, the day you leave the United States, you put something up on social media and someone will be like, oh, that's such a big step. I wish I could be you. And, and like you just said, like, no, this is just like the next small step and like in a path of 18 years of sobriety that has led me to here. And this is a very hard thing to, for people to process, but like, that's what I see in your step is like, not like this big momentous thing. Like, I'm super happy for you that you're doing it. What I really see, Dennis, is like just sort of the next logical step in what's been, a journey of 18 years of sobriety.
Yeah, and I agree. And, I want to tell anybody who is listening, and what you just said is great. Like, wow, I really wish I could do that. Well, you can.
You can.
We can all do whatever. You just said, there's still lots of steps to do, lots of things to learn, about the path you chose, the business that you're building and all that. And there always is. But now what you did was you removed some of the other crap out of the way so you could focus just on that. You don't have, when most of my work is in two areas, addiction recovery or marriage and relationships. Those are my two. It's like a 50-50 split in my practice. And relationships are so hard. They didn't used to be what they are today. Relationships are hard because you have two human beings trying to coexist. So just by the nature, they're hard. It doesn't have to be man, woman, or whatever floats your boat. But there's so many other things to juggle. Before it was like there was kids and work and then your relationship stuff. Now there's all that and retirement plans and what people think about me and politics and Facebook and TikTok and all this stuff going on that we have to manage in addition to two human beings coexisting together.
It's so interesting that I love this, and I'll sort of frame the two-person collaboration in a very different form. The gold medal that I won at the Olympic Games was not I won, it's a we won. I was paddling a two-person canoe with my canoe partner, Scott Strasball. And I'm actually in the process of my coaching practice is going really well. I love it. But I so often find in the nature of my one-to-one conversations that there's often one key relationship in their professional life that is very much attached to getting things right, about, experiencing joy and contentment, either personally or professionally. And that I just think that there is something, not for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, we want to get these two-person collaborations right, whether that's in a personal relationship way or a professional relationship way. And so I'm kind of opening up an element of my coaching practice that is just focused on two-person teams. And it's not the funny thing is like you would think it's based on Scott and myself, all these things we learned winning the gold medal at the Olympic Games, but it's actually based on so many mistakes that we made. My efforts to try to, my destructive tendencies to try to blow up the team and not understanding why I was doing that. And yet, but I think it's so true that we want to get these two-person collaborations right in our life, whether it's in business or it's in our life outside of business. And it's really hard. And I think understanding like what the dynamics are for making it hard. And when two people don't give themselves like a safe space to collaborate, to reflect, to talk about these things, and to really set like a way to use that space in a smart, purposeful way, it gets harder after that. And but that's I certainly have a lot of thoughts about these kind of collaborations, whether it's two people, two co-founders of a business, maybe two people running a division of an organization, like one sales, one operation. Maybe it's a progressive 1 and 2 in an organization that is, trying to kind of strike that balance between leadership, the strategy and tactics. And yeah, I mean, it's actually really hard to do alone. You're right. It's hard to do, and it's hard to do alone.
It is, and that's a great point that I want to lead into next. And I came up recently with the 3 A's to success. Awareness, which we already talked about, right? We can't solve a problem we can't admit exists, or we're unaware is out there. And then the next one is action. There's this whole like law of attraction thing, The Secret, that book. That's a lot of that is a bunch of crap, the way that they have it presented. The power of positive thinking. Positive thinking will never change your life. You want to think positively while you're working, while you're taking action. She didn't put that in the book. Otherwise, she wouldn't be worth $100 million. Like, what people want the most out of life with the least amount of effort. So they heard, wow, I could just sit around and manifest 6-figure checks coming in the mail, and then I can get stoned and play Xbox all day. And that's not how it works, right? So we want to think positively while you're taking action. And the last piece of that puzzle is what you were just talking about, is it's hard for the two to figure it out on their own. We need accountability. And that's where you and I come in as coaches. So do you know why you need a coach? Because we all do. I was taught to have an expert in every area of my life. If I have to go to court, I need a lawyer. If I get sick, I need a doctor. If I hate doing taxes, so I need an accountant to do that, right? So I needed a coach to help pull me through some of these difficult areas of my life. And I have a coach that I meet with every week. In February, I was in Mexico for that whole month. And while I was there, I stopped seeing my coach, and my productivity fell, my motivation fell, my performance fell. Part of it was I was also on the beach having a vacation. I only worked maybe a half of the time, but my enthusiasm also took a hit. And I think it was because I didn't have the accountability I was used to having. I don't depend on it for my success, but I enjoyed the motivation. And I think we all need that accountability to hold our feet to the fire, to make sure that our action gets done at a high level.
In the case, not only did, of course, Scott and I have coaching in the doubles canoe, really amazing coaching. But what really moved us through the hardest time was working with a sports psychologist. I mean, that was really bringing in the big part, and not separated. I mean, together. It was, the work was done together. I mean, of course, the sports psychologist formed relationships with us, but the real kind of substance of the work together was done together. In the business world today, for good reason, there's a lot of talk about diverse teams, diversity in teams. I started paddling with Scott in 1987 when I was a senior in high school, and Scott had already graduated college. So like there was a really big difference in, maturity. I mean, like I couldn't imagine a college graduate paddling with a guy, trusting everything to a guy who hadn't even graduated high school yet. And we were super different people. Scott was super analytical, introverted, just a master technician. And me, I was very extroverted, outgoing. I tell people, we weren't 180 degrees different, but about 179. And I think had we been 175 degrees different, I don't think we would have won the Olympic Games. And that really formulated a lot of my ideas on diverse teams. And it's fun to kind of bring that into the conversation today it plays out in a very different way today, the idea of diverse teams. It was a big, important part of our story, and having a sports psychologist that kind of figured out how to bring the part that matters most together. That's something that I love carrying forward into situations where organizations are really dependent upon a two-person collaboration working out for, it could be a group of investors, that have put a lot of money into a great idea. But the idea is only going to be as good as the two people working together in a solid way.
What you were talking about with the sports psychologist, when you have any two people, you know what else is in there? Emotion, right? So there's emotion stuff. There's emotional attachments. There's different ideas of how things are supposed to go. And so when we bring in a coach or a psychologist, a sports psychologist, whoever, somebody who is trained and also isn't emotionally attached to your craft, that can see things differently than you can see it, because you were like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. I'm attached to how it's supposed to go, how you're supposed to behave. And somebody outside says, hey, why don't we look at it from this angle? And you're like, oh, well, I didn't think of that. That's great.
It's really interesting. I was raised as a young athlete. I had what I call this Malcolm Gladwell outliers moment, where the training group that I was raised in Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River, when I was, I started paddling with that group when I was 13 years old. It was one of the greatest training groups in the history of whitewater canoe slalom. And my first workout, everyone there was a world champion, a world medalist, or the legendary coach of the sport. Having those surroundings, having that kind of environment really awakens you, giving you more perspective on what's going down. That even just that spirit of competition. But it takes help, and it takes a lot of help, and it takes to sort of see things differently. I like to sort of say to have someone help you shine a light on the blind spots that you don't see. That group that I trained in, it taught you that you learned from everybody. You don't just learn from people that are better than you. You learn from people who are different than you. You can learn from people who are near beginners in the sport. Sometimes you can be very advanced at something, and a beginner, and like use kayaking, for example, a beginner shows up on the river and there's something that you see that the beginner is doing not correctly with their posture that just reminds you about something on posture that helps you apply it in a really high performing kind of way. All those world champions that I grew up paddling with, they always conveyed to me that you can learn from anyone. It's not just learning from people who are better than you or people that you're competing with on the same level. You can learn from people who have not had the same success as you. It's just whether you put yourself in the position to learn from them or not.
I think that's growth and maturity. It's like I learned something from every single person I come in contact with, even if what I learn is I don't want to be like them. Some of that is more awareness. It's just being aware that what's going on around me.
I like that. I think that often we try to cut our path going forward that we want to walk based on what we think that we want, which is great. It's okay to be really clear on what you don't want and to move away from what you don't want. And I think both have a role to play, in how we kind of move about the world in a way that, feels good to us and kind of meets us where we are. That, it doesn't have to be just on what we want to do. It can also be about what we don't want to do or what we want less of in our life. That's a perfectly okay thing to do. At least it's worth, I think, for people to find really small ways to experiment with that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. I think that you and I could probably talk for a long time.
Well, let's do this. When you get situated in your new place and you've been settled in for a few months, let's do a round two. And I would love to do this. I would love to do this with you after you've been situated down in Mexico for a few months.
Yeah, I totally 100%. We're totally going to do that. I look forward to it.
Dennis.
So if people want to get in touch with Joe Jacobi, how do they do that?
A couple of things I would say. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can search for me there. My website is joejacobi.com, joejacobi.com. And there it's just a very simple website. You can only do one of two things. You can either click on my coaching, which is also a very simple page, or you can click on a link that will allow you to subscribe to Sunday Morning Joe, which is my Sunday morning newsletter that I've been writing for more than 6 years now. And it's just sort of a labor of love. And I write about performing your best, overcoming challenge, working with uncertainty, and aligning with purpose. And that's really the best way to interact. And people read it and then they hit reply to the emails. I don't have an assistant, so everything comes directly to me, and it opens up incredible conversations on Sunday morning, which I enjoy a lot. But I enjoy writing. So those are the ways to get in touch.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Joe. And thanks everybody for tuning in to the Funky Brain podcast. I hope you learned something great today. I sure did. And I'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye for now. So I've been asked recently, why would I need a life coach and how can a coach help me? Well, I spent the last 15 years helping people overcome their challenges and propel themselves forward in life. And I work with people worldwide via Zoom and currently have clients in New Zealand, England, Australia, and of course, scattered throughout the US here. So how come some people seem to be able to think of great ideas and just get them done at a high level, and some people just get stuck? Well, we need consistency in our lives to specifically define our goals and create specific action steps to get them done on a daily basis. And then execution is key. We can design all the beautiful plans we want, but without proper execution, most plans live a very short life. And then finally, and the most important piece of the puzzle to unlock all that success afterwards is accountability. All the most successful people in the world have coaches, mentors, and accountability partners. Oprah, Richard Branson, Elon Musk. Nobody reaches high levels of success on their own. In most cases, they have teams of people to run their ideas by. It takes more than just a good idea to reach your goals and dreams. It takes hard work, effort, commitment, and dedication. And of course, somebody to hold your feet to the fire to make sure these things get done at a high level. And that's what I do. I help people reach their goals at a high level. I am a high performance coach. And when I say that, I don't just mean money. I mean kicking your addictions and mastering your life, improving your relationships, reaching your financial goals, crushing your health and fitness goals. So reach out today for a free session to start radically changing every area of your life. Don't wait till tomorrow or when it seems like the perfect time. Now is the perfect time to start achieving all your goals and dreams and to radically change your life forever. I'll talk to you soon. Have a beautiful day.